Hey, welcome to the show. I'm here today with Carol Hamilton, who hosts Mission Impact Podcast. Carol, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Oh yeah, it's the what time is it? It's like 5:30 in the evening. We're getting that kind of twilight period. It's all nice and mellow, a little chilly, no
Already dark
snow.
here.
Oh
Already
yeah, it's
dark.
dark. You're in like the DC area. It's dark, super dark.
Yep. Well, hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
except for the outside actual lack of sun. Yes.
It's only dark due to lack of sun. I like that. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Carol. What is? I know you're in the strategic planning game. What is that? What does that mean? What do you do?
Yeah. So I work with organizations to help them get focused on their goals, come together and align around a couple big things that they want to move forward over a couple years, and help them walk through a process that gets them there, and which can take the actual process anywhere from 4 to 6 months. But then they're set up with a roadmap for their next couple years. So once we're done with the work that we do together.
I thought that when you create a strategic plan, you're supposed to create it, kick out the consultant, and then just put it on the shelf and don't touch it for like 10 years. I thought that's how it worked.
Well, hopefully not. Hopefully not. I think that's the bad experience or the fear that people bring to thinking about doing strategic planning, is that you're going to go through a whole process, you're going to have a lot of conversations, you're going to end up with a too long report, so I really try to avoid that and try to keep any kind of plan to a maximum of a couple pages. Mm-hmm. So it's really high level, got the necessary detail there, but not just pages and pages of verbiage that either get put up on the shelf or end up, holding up your monitor, doing other useful things around the office.
Other useful things around the office. That is hilarious. I love that about you, Carolyn. Funny from just the get-go. It's crazy when we make plans like this, when we have these big, hairy, audacious goals. We're in the nonprofit world, right? We're trying to save the universe. Like the goal can seem like forever away. And when you're doing your day-to-day stuff and you try to relate it to that long-term goal, like it's too big of a step. Like I like to do my planning, zoom out, look at that 3, that 5, that 10-year period or whatever it is. But then after that's created and we know we're kind of going down the track, like it's zoomed into the day-to-day. In the military, to get promoted for the Navy, you have these rating exams. You got to take them up to twice a year. And there's this huge, just enormous study list. The farther you get up the ladder, like the bigger the list is. You have to read through all these manuals and all these books and all these instructions. You know, this, that, and the other. You got to look at naval history, all these crazy things. And if you wait till like a month before the exam, it's just too much to get to. But if you're looking out a little bit, if you start 4, 5, 6 months out, you realize that you can go through and read like 3 or 4 paragraphs a day, and you can make it through all the material and be fully prepared for that exam. But that only works if you see that big picture and then break it down to like bite-sized daily chunks. Is that what you teach?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm working with groups, first, I think that kind of big vision, that's, what's the change that you want to see in the world? What's the ultimate, what's going to put your organization out of business? There are some organizations that, their missions are perpetual. A hospital, there's always going to be need for that, other things like that. But, other organizations, really their vision, probably is to put themselves out of business. A homeless shelter doesn't want to actually have people who are homeless. They want folks to have homes, right? They want them to be home. So I think, thinking about what your big vision is, what's that change that you want to see in the world, and then, what are the really a 3-year period for something like that kind of issue is relatively short. So, what are a couple of things that are going to move that mission forward? But then, when I'm working with groups, the next thing is figuring out what are those action steps. But even more importantly is for those, larger action steps, how are you going to know that you've made progress? What's a key metric? What's a, a progress goal? What's success going to look like when you've actually had movement, so that you can, then take a look at 6 months down the line. Where are we? What progress have we made? What needs to be tweaked? But you've defined up front, what that success is going to look like, so that everyone is clear. Because, right, I think it's Dave Allen, who's the guy who wrote Get Things Done. And he says, for most people, their to-do lists, their items are just too large. It's like clean the garage. Well, depending on what your garage looks like, that may be too big of a goal that you just like, okay, next week. But if it's like, open this box and, clean out one box a day, as you're saying, then you make it manageable. So it's always, what are those big goals? But then what's that next right step that's going to get you a little bit further? Oftentimes when I'm working one-on-one with people, thinking about, what would your future self say thank you if you actually took action on it today?
Oh, that is huge. I think Tom Brady just put out that it's just those little things you do every day that no one really sees is what ends up being the big thing at the end. And I'm pretty sure just about everyone listening to this understands, knows who Tom Brady is. I think he's the oldest or the second oldest to ever start at quarterback. Definitely the full time starter, the oldest full time starter. And he's still out there crushing each and every week, doing amazing things. And he really just says, yeah, it's just all that little stuff that you don't see that just kind of adds up over time. Same with Kobe Bryant. He would get up and all he knew for sure is he was going to outwork you in the gym that day. That's his only goal, his only step. That might be scary to some people that I'm going to outwork my competition or whatever the thing is. But I love what you said. If you can just say, I'm going to just put away this one box today, eventually that turns into a clean garage. So love that story.
Yeah, and I think, who is that? I think it's Simon Sinek, who talks about kind of, consistency really trumps intensity. People think about intensity, and so the process that people go through with me can actually feel kind of intense, right? I'm talking to a lot of people at the beginning, having conversations with all sorts of stakeholders. I bring all that together, provide the group with a synthesis of what the big themes are. What are people saying about the organization? What are they saying are its strengths, its growing edges, its challenges. And then, a series of kind of higher level conversations about what do we want to be, where do we want to be in a couple of years. And, there's a lot of work that goes into that, but that intensity only makes a difference if then with staff, with whoever your human, your volunteers, you sit down and then make, okay, what's our 6-month implementation plan? What's our 1-year implementation plan that takes those bigger goals and really, as you're talking about, makes it much more tangible and, gets down into the nitty gritty of who's going to do what by when, and really assigns accountability, but doesn't worry about that for 3 years from now. I think that's another mistake, that with those big plans that are, now holding up people's monitors, where they got tripped up is that they try to figure out exactly what they were going to be doing in year 3 and who was going to be doing it. Well, we know that if the last 2 years hasn't had everyone wake up and say, okay, things are outside of our control and we can't predict the future, I don't know what will. So, taking a lot of time to try to think that far ahead in terms of the detail, I think is a wasted effort. So really just focus in on that first year, and then just make sure that you have time and you have a process, and you know that you're going to dedicate some time to then say, okay, how far did we get? What tweaks do we need to make? And then what are we going to do year 2?
Oh, absolutely. And I find that it is invaluable, especially short term, to say, what is the task and what is the purpose of the task? Really, the what is done look like? What does success look like? What does this metric look like? So many times in the nonprofit, especially in the startup space, you're just doing stuff and you don't necessarily know what things are going to have the impact you need. You know what programs are going to be doing well. You're not sure where the money is going to come from. and to stop what you're doing and think about putting together a strategic plan, A, to let someone from the outside come in and look at your fun disaster mess thing that you've created, right? Trying to do your labor of love and passion, to have someone else come in and look at that and, like, hey, come on over to my house. I haven't cleaned up in 3 years, but come on in and take a look. It's a little nerve wracking. It can be. And if you're not sure what to do, like, what do you tell people that are trying to figure out, like, do I need someone to help me come and do strategic planning? Like, what do you tell people like that?
I mean, organizations can try to tackle this themselves. I think, it can be challenging. The value that someone from the outside coming in isn't so much to say, when I'm working with groups, my goal isn't to diagnose what's going on, or you've got this problem here and this is how you're going to fix it, but more help, like, put up a mirror. So yeah, if the mirror is the house has never been cleaned, then they'll have some things to deal with in the mirror. But most organizations aren't really in that spot, or if they are, they know it, and they're willing to do, and they're ready to deal with it, right? When you bring somebody in to help you out, I try to work with people who are ready to accept the help. If they don't want the help, then they can just keep trying to do it themselves. But oftentimes groups, especially at the startup, will try to have a board member facilitate things for them, or another way that if you can't afford to hire a consultant, is to see if you can get some pro bono services from locals, students, graduate students who might be doing organization development or nonprofit management or something like that. But I do think it's valuable to have someone from the outside, more to help design and keep the conversation moving, because I don't have a stake in the outcome. I have a stake in the outcome in that I want to help the group make sure that they come up with goals that are doable for them, and not 7, right? Like 3, 4, 5, no more than 5. But I don't have a stake in what those goals are. Mm-hmm. And so that's the value of having someone from the outside, is that I can keep the conversation moving, help everyone have their say, help people feel bought in to the conversation and to the final outcome, without feeling like the person who's managing the agenda also has an agenda.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so important. It's weird because in the nonprofit industry, other than the IRS worrying about where the dollars are going, there's not really, depending on what you're working on, not really like a regulatory committee or organization coming to watch over you. You're kind of left up to just doing whatever you think is right to make it happen. And it either meets the IRS requirements for a tax write off or it doesn't. Uh, it's very interesting because most people are like, oh, we just have no idea what we're doing. We have no idea how to create sustainable income. We have no idea how to do this. We have no idea. We have the person that's fundraising, but he also has these other 30 duties, and everyone's wearing 12 hats and just trying to make a difference. And I think bringing someone in from the outside perspective that has maybe some other experience is just so useful. But as you said, as long as they're ready to accept and take care of whatever comes up. I found one of the biggest struggles in my world is people are either, I'm a guy that holds everyone in my circle accountable. You're either ready for accountability or you're not interested. And if you're not interested in accountability, then it looks like I'm the jerk, right? Because I don't let a whole lot of stuff slide because I want people in my circle to hold me accountable. So if you're not ready to look in the mirror, don't call Carol. She's going to be like, here it is, like it or not. I'm sure you have a softer touch than that, but
in most cases, the organizations that I'm working with, I mean, everybody has some challenges or gaps, but in a lot of cases, there's always a lot to celebrate. There's just always a lot to celebrate. And I think actually one of the values of doing a process like this is to actually give people a synthesis of all of their strengths, all of the things that they are doing well, and the things that they can celebrate and build on. because I really try to take that kind of strengths-based appreciative approach where it's not about me coming in and telling you what all your problems are, because especially with nonprofit organizations that are so dependent on volunteers, so dependent on people's passion for an area. Let's focus on what's working and how we can grow that. If I can bring some perspective. So, for example, I was working with an organization, and they were going through a really typical transition of a volunteer founder who'd been involved forever and ever. This was her baby as an organization. And, she was getting older. Intellectually, she knew she needed to hand it off. She said she wanted to hand it off. Behaviorally, she was just struggling with that. And I mean, what was helpful is that I was able to bring them a model of like, okay, this is a typical life cycle of a nonprofit. And this is a very common transition that every organization goes through. These are the pain points that most organizations have when they're in it. And people were all able to kind of take a sigh of relief and say, oh, we're just like everybody else. We're struggling through the same things. It's going to be okay. These are some steps we can take, and just depersonalize it, not make it about at the beginning, when I was working with them, they felt like it was all their very unique challenge. And obviously they are unique, and every organization is unique. And there are common challenges that organizations go through. So I think, all of us, when we're feeling alone in a problem, finding out that other people have the same problem brings a lot of relief.
That's a huge setup for a detour into some mental health issues, which we're not going to cover. But I will.
Well, there's always that too.
I will make one quip. Like when people talk about their struggles and just an honest, earnest, like, hey, I'm struggling with this, not trying to dominate the conversation or spread toxicity, but like, hey, I'm struggling with this. The sooner you open up, the more you realize that everyone has dealt with just about everything you're coming up with at some point in their life. So there's empathy out there. There's solutions for you. There's shoulders to cry on if that's what you need. So don't hold that in if you're struggling with that today. But we're not segueing into that deeper, much deeper and well-needed conversation. But you do some different things. You really look at like the human-centered design of this thing. You look at appreciative inquiry. Like, what do those mean to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, in everything I'm doing as I'm helping and working with an organization, there's some consultants that come in and will help you look at all your bylaws and will, get into the nitty gritty of your fundraising campaign, or kind of how do you do this piece operationally? And I'm really looking at how are all the people working together? How can we help them work more effectively together? Centering the human-centered, centering the humans in the system. What are you doing to take care of everybody as you're putting together your goals? Are those goals, are you creating goals that basically mean everyone has to work themselves to death? Well, let's hold up and take a breath there and step back and see what's realistic, what's doable with the people that you have, staff, volunteers, with the budget that you have. What can you actually do? And, not make everyone a martyr to the cause. So really centering the people as, whether it's the folks in the organization inside, but then thinking about all the stakeholders, helping people think about what's the kind of wider ecosystem that they're part of. And then, as I said, that, appreciative inquiry is just a fancy word for an approach that basically says, let's try to focus on the positive, not to ignore problems. So the point isn't to, just pretend that we're not seeing that part of the mirror that's showing the mess in the corner. We'll deal with the mess, but we're not going to only focus on the mess. We're going to also lift up and pay attention to the things that are going well. Because I think people, we all as humans have a bias towards the negative. It's much easier for us to remember negative things, negative feedback, all of that. So
that's how we stay safe.
Yeah, it's how we stay
Identifying the
safe.
negative, identifying the threats is how we stay safe. That's why it's a huge
Exactly,
part of our
exactly. So we're
existence.
really, our whole brain is like primed to that, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you're talking about. And so it actually takes some time and work to shift that and think, okay, what are we actually doing well? What are all the things that are working here? And help people remember those things.
Oh yeah, I definitely love that. You know, when we are focusing on a cause, like taking care of animals, saving the environment, helping the homeless, like we put a lot of time, energy, and effort into those. And sometimes we forget that we're fighting for this cause alongside of other people in our organization. And sometimes different departments, different divisions, different offices kind of forget that there's other human people that we're working with. And no one takes it, no one takes the heat more than the volunteers that I think. But when we realize and take a step back that we're all in this together working towards a common cause, it's a lot easier to get along. It's a lot easier to remember that we're trying to all kind of help the same thing. And we can work together and treat each other with dignity and focus on the positive, not ignore the
Yeah, and I
negative, but
think,
focus on the positive.
yeah, I just, not only remembering all the people in the organization, but even also, thinking about who else is doing similar work to us, who else might we be able to partner with and align ourselves with to, create a bigger impact. And well, I lost my train of thought there. Oh well.
You are next to the trains, so I figured one would be coming
The
along here
train
for you
didn't
to
go
pick
by,
up
but I
on.
lost my train of thought anyway.
Folks, listen to this. Carol lives like right next to the train tracks. It's apparently the other side of the tracks. It's a freight train. There's no schedule. Who knows what's going to happen? Screw it. We're going
It's
live.
been quiet. It's been quiet since the snow's been here. So
Yeah, you never know. You never know. Her train of thought could come right on back. But you're really looking at a lot of these high level, higher end goals. And how does focusing on these high level goals help people refocus on the mission?
well, it's interesting because I think another fear that people have with strategic planning is that they're going to start out with a long, bogged down conversation about what our mission statement is, and a large group trying to wordsmith that. So I actually have groups kind of back into it, and so have all those conversations about like, what's our current state? What's that? We hold the mirror up and say, this is what all the things that are going on with you right now. Help people think about what are the bigger trends beyond their organization that they need to think about, and then what's the big vision of where we want to be, and then what are the realistic goals that are going to get us there. And oh my god, I clearly need dinner because I keep losing my train of thought. Where was it? What
We've
did you
got low
ask
blood
me? You
sugar
asked me
here. We've got
high level goals.
high level goals, and we're not wordsmithing the mission
The
statement.
mission, has to connect to the mission.
Yeah.
And so actually coming back to the mission at the end to see, one, if you don't have one, then writing one. But really having folks just do drafts in the big group and just assigning one person to then finalize it. But then, taking a look at the mission at the end to see, if you've already got one, is there anything that needs to be updated based on the conversations that you've had, so that you don't kind of get lost in the vastness of that vision or that mission that you're looking at, versus, if you were to start there. So I think that actually ends up being helpful to kind of, start with where are you now, what's your current state, longer, and then okay, what implications does that have to what we say our purpose is in terms of our organization.
I am a huge fan of the short, concise mission statement. In my opinion, and Travis doesn't know everything, but in my opinion, the shorter, the better. I love when people talk and they've got like 3 or 4 sentences or 2 paragraphs about your mission statement. And I'm good Lord, is there something that you don't cover? When you look at some of these other organizations out there, you can go do a quick Google search. It's worth a Google. Like top 5 companies, top 5 organizations, like what's their mission statement? Something like TED Talks, TED. Their mission statement is 2 words. It's spread ideas. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be crazy. It doesn't have to be convoluted. I'm still active duty Navy, and I deal with a lot of veterans organizations, and thank God that we have them. But I say, hey, ask a random person in the organization, hey, what's your mission statement? And I'll ask someone else, and I'll ask someone else, and I'll ask the founder, and I'll get 3 or 4 different stories. I'm not saying that's a problem, but if they can't convey to someone what it is the heck that you do, that is a problem. They've got to know and be able to understand it well enough to convey that to anyone that asks about the organization, what the heck it is you do and stand for.
Yeah, I think, it used to be that mission statements, were kind of that longer, convoluted thing. And I think that the thing that people basically eliminated out of that, and I think it's a good thing, is taking out the how. You don't have to tell people about every program that you do in your mission statement, or in, if you, so what's the organization that you work for or volunteer with, and what's the purpose? I mean, that's what I one of the questions that I actually ask people at the beginning of the process is for them to describe the purpose of the organization. So I don't ask them to quote the mission statement. I don't test them that way. But I say, what would you describe? Why does this organization exist? What's it trying to do? What's its purpose? And just to see how much commonality there is and how much agreement is. And what's actually interesting is that I think another fear that people have around strategic planning is that they really think that there's going to be a real wide diversity of opinion, and it's going to be this huge kind of so many different voices and so many different opinions. And I think one of the pleasant surprises that organizations often have once I go through and talk to everybody is that actually there's more agreement and more commonality than they would have thought. Once I can kind of see, like, here are the nuggets that I'm hearing from, all the different people that I've talked to. So that can be really reassuring that actually, we're starting at a common starting place. We have a common understanding of, what our current state is, and we can move on from there.
Yeah, there's a lot more consensus than people want to think that there is. And you
Yeah,
don't know it.
yeah.
You kind of feel it intrinsically, but you don't know it until you actually put it out on the table. You mentioned a little bit earlier about collaboration and working with other organizations to make it happen. I can't personally, right now on this spot, think of a single organization that has like solved their problem. Every time I think of something that's really been solved and you have these great big gains and huge advances in some area, it's because organizations are working together to work towards the common solution. Organizations that 2 or 3, 5, 10 nonprofits get together, you have a civilian component, you have a government component, and everyone has agreed to work their part of it in order to work towards the solution. Has that been your experience?
Oh yeah, I think coalitions and networks of groups coming together to just share what they're doing, even if it just started as a kind of information sharing of what are all the different pieces that each group is doing, so that you're not duplicating efforts, you're not you're able to amplify what each other are doing, you're able to figure out each group's core competency and see how they complement each other. I was actually on another podcast where the host asked me, well, what would you say to someone who wants to start up a nonprofit? And I actually said, I would say, don't. First, go and look and see who's working on the issue that you care about in your community. Or
that's
regionally,
always my first
nationally.
question. Who else is doing it in
Who
your neck of the
else is
woods?
doing the work?
Who else is doing it?
And it could be the real way for you to implement the vision or passion that you have is to sign up with them, get involved, and help with something that's already moving, versus taking all the time and work to create a whole new organization. I mean, if there's if nobody else is doing exactly what you want, great, but do the homework to find out what the playing field is already.
Yeah, doing that actual research. I did an interview with Candace Leozu from Foster 360 a few years ago, and she's in like the Phoenix, Tempe, Mesa, Arizona, like I don't know, megalopolis, whatever. There's no boundaries in the desert. This thing is just growing. But she was in business. She had a huge heart for foster kids. I'm a foster kid. So I was like, oh, that's wonderful. And she wanted to help people that were aging out, and she wasn't sure what she wanted to do. So she went out and canvassed. She did her research and went and searched, and she found that there was tons of organizations that were helping kids aging out of the foster care system. She's like, that's wonderful. And then she's like, is there something that they're missing? Because there's so many organizations, something's got to be missing. And she found that at the time, the organizations weren't working together very well. And so, what that looks like for the individual, the now newly minted adult aging out of the system, is they're getting passed from organization to organization, just like they were getting passed around the foster care system. And she was like, no, we can't do that anymore. She created Foster 360 to partner up the kids with an adult to help them navigate through all this stuff. And their mentor would stay with them throughout the whole process. So she found a way, found a gap in what she wanted to do and where her passion was, and found a way to provide real value. And then they opened up, I believe, I don't know if I remember all the details from 2 years ago, but they opened up under the United Way umbrella. So they didn't have to do all the paperwork and all the stuff and all the things. They already had name recognition. They already had a marketing department. They already had all of these things. And you can find so many ways to help without necessarily opening your own brand new organization, which you don't own and you're not in charge of.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that makes me think of a network that came together, and one of the things that they felt like they'd mapped all the people, all the organizations that were in this particular network. I think it probably had to do with childcare or early childhood services or whatnot. And what they found was exactly what you're talking about. From the client experience, it was this disjointed, disparate, being passed from one group to another. Okay, we don't do that, you got to go over here. We don't do that, you got to go over there. Experience. And so one of the things that they actually worked on, very similar to what you're talking about, was trying to smooth that the service delivery for all the folks that they were working with by working together more closely.
Oh, it's just fantastic. There's so many ways to get involved. Like if you have a business, setting up a time dedicated for your employees to go either help with a specific organization or to get paid days off to go work with other organizations, or creating your own fundraising campaign to partner with a nonprofit to help deliver them benefits, all of which you can do without starting your own organization. I don't know what the obsession is with starting your own organization, but the thing, I mean, it's everywhere. It's nonstop. If you do want to start your own organization, we have Nonprofit in a Box. It has all the documents you need to start up. I'm not saying you should use it or do it, but if you are going to do it, you might as well save a few grand by picking that up for under $300. But there's so much more to unpack here, Carol, because you give them a whole year one implementation plan. You're not walking away with.
Well, I make them do it.
You make them do it, but they have it. They have it.
By the time we're finished working with together, they have that, and they have that. I do that, with usually I'm working with organizations that are a little past the startup phase, and they're 5-10 years in. Maybe they have a couple staff, and so once the board is kind of done with that bigger strategy piece and those big goals, working with the staff, then I work with the staff to really get into the detail of the implementation. So yeah, and like I said, that's where we really get into the who, what, when, and why. All the nailing down the milestones and who's responsible for what the accountabilities are, et cetera.
Right, but you guys, you've created this thing in partnership with the staff, and they have this plan. But I mean, obviously, things are going to come up during this time that are going to bring new pieces of information, or shiny object syndrome, SOS. That's how you know you're in trouble. Like, how do you have them handle that when that pops up?
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think that's another thing that people are afraid of, that if they commit to these three things, well, and just as, and inevitably, right, as soon as you finish the process, you've had the vote, you've approved the plan, you're all good, you've got it all set, and then something else pops up, and it could be a really great opportunity, it could be a challenge, It could be shiny object syndrome. So as part of the process, what I help them do is also identify what are the criteria that you're going to use to make future decisions. So through that, I work with them to just develop something called a strategy screen. Not something that I created. This was, I adopted this from La Piana Consulting. You can find more information on their website about what these look like. But basically, it's like if you've got kids in school now, they all have rubrics for their assignments. But this is just essentially like a decision tree, defining what the criteria are. If, let's say, one of them always is going to be, how is this initiative related to our mission? Is it in mission? Is it out? And so, a low would be it's not at all, medium somewhat. Number 3, yep, it's in line. And number 4, it's absolutely, going to be the most important thing moving forward. And so for all the different criteria, and some are pretty common in terms of, how will those help your reputation and your branding and your visibility? And some things will be more appropriate to one group versus another. But just help them have some of those kind of basic criteria for how they're going to make a decision, and then what are the particular things that are super important to them. And then basically, 0 to 4, how are you going to score this thing, whatever this initiative is, on each of those criteria? And by having that tool and creating that tool before you are confronted with a decision, it gives you a little bit, again, it's kind of depersonalizing it. It gives you, you've already agreed what your criteria are going to be, and it doesn't come down to the person who's presenting this exciting new opportunity happens to be very influential and super persuasive. And so we always do what that person says. But you have this rubric, it gives you a little more, you can come at each thing a little more dispassionately.
Yeah, it kind of disperses the power and gets that one person that can convince anybody of anything. Instead of
we've been there, we've been in that meeting.
Yeah, oh yeah, we've all been in that meeting. I've ran those meetings.
Watch out, he's the guy.
When I look at stuff from the military and I look at stuff from my business, I look at, first and foremost, is this thing that popped up going to help me reach my goals? In the business world, it's a little bit more specific. It's me, my business goals, my stuff, right? I'm running the show. In the nonprofit world, it's just a little bit more input, right? You've got the board of directors, maybe the president, founder, whomever you have. Like, is this in line with our top 3 goals? If it's not, it's almost just a non-starter right from the get-go. And then something I use for me personally, I've got teams that do different things. Like, if it makes us money, or if it saves us some money without sacrificing quality, do it and just give me a report on it later. Why on earth do I need to have some proposal written up for this thing to do out and go to the whatever to do the thing that 3 months from now we're going to implement? If it makes us money or saves us money, do it today. One of the frustrations I get with some boards is their kind of unwillingness to make anything happen. There's people out there that do drop shipping. There's no upfront cost. You can promote your stuff. They'll create it. They get paid. They create it. They make it. They ship it. And at the end of the month, they just give you all the money that you've earned, that you've agreed upon. The board, no one in the organization needs to do any work, but to get them to say yes is the stupid, disgusting process. Requires no work from them, but they won't do it. I don't understand that at all. I don't get it. I don't understand the mentality. Why is this thing being roundtabled and then shot down when you literally don't have to do any work to get it done? It kills me. Is your board, have you come across this where boards are just stonewalling any and all innovation?
I don't know. I think, when you're, there are probably a lot of different things going on there that, would be particular to the organization, but, just one, how long have the people been on the board? Do you have some kind of regular rotation where new people are coming in, so you have some new voices that can question things, shake things up? so term limits can be a structural way to kind of make sure that you're always getting new people in and new perspectives. And then, oftentimes is what's the relationship between the executive director and the board? Kind of is it a partnership? Do they have shared leadership, or is one kind of dominating? And if they're always saying no, like, what's behind that? What are they afraid of? What's going on? What's with that resistance to whatever the thing is? So, I think a lot of times when people talk about resistance to whatever they want to do, whatever, they're trying to move forward, they get frustrated with the other people. But usually if you dig a little deeper, there's something that people are afraid of losing if they say no to stuff. So
yeah, fear of loss is much more powerful than the fear of gain.
Yeah.
Much more powerful.
It's easier to stay in the status quo than to take the risk, even if it seems really easy, like the situation you described.
Yeah. The fear of losing $100, the amount of emotional change if you lose that $100 is far different and far greater than the joy of gaining $100. It's just absolutely bananas how those two are compared. It's nuts.
Yeah.
What other, as we're getting ready to wrap up here, Carol, what other parting shots, questions, promotions, anything that you want to chat about as we're getting ready to close it out today?
Yeah, I just encourage people, if you're a podcast listener, obviously you are, because you're here listening to us, check me out over at Mission Impact Podcast. I have interviews with experts from across the nonprofit sector, and we do a show about twice a month. So, enough, but not too much. And I've had it's just been a great opportunity to talk to some really wonderful people. And you can find me at Grace Social Sector Consulting, gracesocialsector.com. And yeah, so excited to connect with people and see how we can, if there might be synergies for me to help them out.
Absolutely. And thanks so much for talking about strategic planning today, how to keep it human-centered and do that appreciative inquiry. Taking a look at those high-level goals is always a big deal. Walking away with a year one implementation plan and then the strategy screen to understand that things are going to come up when you're done with the primary consultant gig and they have to actually continue to make decisions without you in the room. I know it's tough. I know it's tough, but sometimes it happens. Thank you so much for sharing today. Check out Carol's podcast and my podcast in the same place, nonprofitarchitect.org. We have the nonprofit podcast network. We've got over a dozen great nonprofit shows, including mine and Carol's, and a bunch of other great voices in the nonprofit world as well. Thank you again, Carol, for being my guest today.
All right. Thank you, Travis. It was great talking to you.